Hey, Dave. Dave? No, he's not. Here he goes. It's a live meeting. It's at the Makers Works, but I don't think I want to do that.
Is he on? Dave, is he on?
No, they can't hear me, so I'm gonna stop the video. I didn't.
Oh, there it goes again. I pushed stop.
No, just go to the number, the 7 o'clock or 5 to 6:55 p.m. alarm, and make sure you take the button and push it off.
I have to get his phone. I'll be back.
One, two, three.
Oh, you guys hear us?
Stuff like that.
All right, we're gonna get started. We're all playing a little delay on traffic. Tonight we're going to talk about the 5-part tour. Rail style, cope stick, mortise and tenon. And it's kind of a new concept, we'll see how it works, talk about it in the board is having a meeting going like for beginner, amateur and expert, nothing degrading about any one of them. Not even degrading about the experts. And usually it means what power tool you started out with or have access to. Commonalities, probably biscuits, pocket screws, dowels, domino, squares. So that's what we're going to try to do. And we're hopefully get people thinking that when we have the other recent meetings from here on, that don't feel bad about showing how to start with, because a lot of times we do have new people coming and people trying to pick up some tips from people. Anybody new here? Am I new tonight? All right, let's just name and how you heard about us.
Jason Stacko, I found out, I was taking a class with the Hawk taught by Dave, actually 2 of them, so. You mentioned this, I started joining remotely and everything and.
You don't have a non-disclosure agreement. I have to say how Dave did.
That's okay. I learned a lot.
All right.
Hoping you'll do another one.
In the back there.
Oh,
Somebody else was new?
she was.
Oh, hi.
I'm tagging along with this guy.
Oh, well, we won't hold you that. We won't hold that.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey, my name is Elvira. And I've heard about this gathering every month for the last year since I've been working here in this shop. And I never had time to join.
Yes.
What kind of stuff do you do? What kind of stuff do you do? What kind do you build?
I am making furniture, live edge furniture that they can afford to buy.
Good, great.
Good.
There's someone else in the back.
Steve, I got an email.
You just got an email?
Yep.
Okay, with a Nigerian prince? Didn't go in the spam.
I think it's Nigerian king now.
They graduated, moved up.
Yeah. So, okay. Anybody have anything for show and tell? Nothing?
Yeah,
Nothing.
there are a couple slides I wanted to offer in terms of the lessons learned. And where do I stand or? Can you
Great
just-
question.
Can you just?
Stand so that you are in the view of that phone.
You are in the view. You already are.
You're perfect. So we should pin the phone. Hold on one second and I'll share the screen. Oh,
It doesn't matter.
I'm right, I share the screen.
Yeah.
Oh.
So we had a thing going where this is what Steve did and don't do it, but this is what Stefan did and try not to do it. There you go.
Don't try this at home.
Yes. So lesson learned, nod to Homer. You can hit the next one. So MFT tables from Festool, all sorts of different dogs that are out there. Initially, there were Quaz dogs, which were aluminum. And aluminum is a good thing if you run your saw into it. In contrast to the bark dogs that are stainless. If you run your blade into a stainless, that's a different experience. For the blade. It's the end of the game. So this is an example of accidentally hitting one of the Quaz dogs that are aluminum and the blade goes, yeah, whatever, and just keeps going, right? So lesson learned, check where your dogs are. And ideally not run a saw into them. But if they're aluminum, you get to continue the game. Next one. So this is another MFT. We're here to entertain, come on. So, there you go. Now, the rail on the MFT is aluminum, so you run your saw onto that, you're still good and you can continue playing the game. And the fence or the track wasn't always straight, so. And actually, this opening is really good because you can lay a piece of wood over there and use your pull saw to use that as a relief area. But it actually wasn't by design initially. So thanks for the close-up, Dave.
Is that a cross, Steph, is that a crosscut system? Sorry.
On the MFT table. So Festool makes a table with 20-inch diameter holes in them, strategically placed. 20 mil. What did I say? No. No, it does go in there. Versus the US primarily 3/4 inch. And they're strategically located equally so that you can make right angles, 45 degrees, really nicely. And then if you purchase the additional track that goes with most Festool saws, you basically are doing crosscut. Yeah.
They don't guarantee the alignment though.
No.
So,
And I've got
it's not.
I've got a whole other set of slides on how you actually get perfect 90s. This has a bit of a backstory. My partner designed a chair. This isn't the first one. And this was the design, and it was met with good reviews. And we got a bunch of requests to make more. Sold the first one. And this is what happens when you get sloppy and you don't pay attention and concentrate. So those sides, we had this piece in the wrong jig and cut into it. Not what you want. We thought it'd get covered up. You're doing a damn good job.
Focus on the imperfections.
Now, we did pull this upholstery up a little, this weaving up a little bit. We thought it'd be hidden, but I pulled it up so that you can see it, and Dave does an excellent job with the video here, zooming in on it. So the point being is that, yeah, we've built a dozen of these things. Yeah, just keep going through it. You can do it in your sleep. No, and that's where I've become religious about blue tape and labeling left arm upper, right arm upper. And I actually go so far as I use red versus green colors to keep another visual cue. I'm all about visual factory stuff. Otherwise, I get sloppy and I go, yeah, I know how to do this. And that's what happened. So that's just the lesson learned. This is a little bit still a lesson learned. So I got asked to hang a bunch of sliding doors. And I said, well, yeah, get Johnson Hardware, because everyone here who knows me, I rave about Johnson Hardware, best sort of pocket door, sliding door stuff. And they said, yeah, we got the doors in stock. Come in, pick them up. Owner got them. And they said, come in and hang them up. I said, 20-minute job, right? Well, what I didn't realize was this detail that you have all these parallel lines, and then you got the sides. So everything, you can't cheat on this, right? Because it's got to be flush. There's no trim here. It's got to be perfect here. And these bloody lines here, they've got to match up. So the lesson learned is check what the beforehand.
Good meeting. Here to help.
You're next. We're gonna do your slide next.
We're amongst friends, right? No one's gonna know about this. But it's amazing how traumatic it can be and how long it takes to get all that stuff to line up as close as possible. And those parallel lines will just kill you. And if you don't have trim to sort of fudge your way through it, it gets even more painful. And so that's why you got to go back and pull drywall off and then re-shim everything and get perfect drywall. And it just is not a lot of fun. So it costs a lot more. It took ungodly more time than I ever expected. And there were, I don't know, 8 of these.
Oh, that's a big job.
Yeah. So that was a major. This is another one, not so much a dope, but you go, well, where's that wrench? And this is the cautionary tale also. I learned this from somebody else of, when replacing the router bit or the table saw blade, have everything unplugged. And this sort of forces that into the process by zip tying the wrench to the end of the cord, so it's unplugged when you start taking it apart. And I did that with the table saw too. So if we change the blade, you have to unplug it before you can get the wrench. So that's just a cautionary tale. I still have, all this stuff going. Those are the highlights of major.
Thanks.
So the next thing on my list is really. Stefan was not paid to be the lead into this, but we are looking for people to present at these meetings. We do surveys a lot, and we found that the social portion of our meeting is significant to the people that come. And getting to know each other and see each other and this and that. So, and the meetings are much better when members participate. So what we're looking at is anybody that wants to, got an idea that they want to talk about anything or think there's something, get a hold of one of the board members or send an email to the board and say, hey, look, I wouldn't mind, giving you 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and we don't need anybody to carry the entire presentation. We just need, a lot of times you find out we put it up there, we got enough people that will just rattle on forever. So you just got to start something and then we can get it going. So
Talk about your mistakes, talk about things you've done, whatever.
yeah.
Just,
So
just come and talk.
The other
It's a good
thing,
way-
actually,
it's
I
a
got
good way for
one,
people to get to know you.
you mentioned MFT and 90 degrees. If there's anybody else that's been into this game and trying to get an MFT to cut 90 degrees or using your track saw to cut consistently, I'm talking dead nuts within 2000s or so. We could start something because I've got a whole bunch of.
and what about, and there's a ton of gadgets for
all
track
crap.
saws. Yeah.
But if, we could start something, we could put some slides together.
Okay.
On that.
By the way, the other thing, the board is an open, there's nothing exclusive or interesting about the board. So please join. We would love some fresh meat on the board.
Yeah. Volunteer.
That's crazy.
You can, you can steer the club in different directions if you want to try different things.
Yeah.
It's real fun.
All
I
right.
think the idea of MFT, talking about MFT tables and,
Yeah.
I made one and I'm sort of curious. What sort of things I might put on it, because I don't have some of the things, but I do have the holes. So I'd be interested. So I think we could build a topic around that.
Okay. So December meeting is always we always have a Christmas meeting or what I call it, and it's basically always show and tell. And cookies and cake and eggnog and good stuff. But we don't always get enough show and tell. So late in the last few years. So we come up with a challenge. For the Christmas show and tell, the challenge is for people to bring in a stool that they've made. It can be a footstool, it can be a stool you use in the shop, it can be one that's used for the kitchen. Maybe for the dog to get in, anyway, so that's the challenge, and we're gonna have, bringing in their different stools and, that's our challenge. So.
There's
Alright.
prizes.
Yeah, we're gonna have gifts.
Yeah, we're gonna have gifts. We haven't figured out them yet, but they're gonna be gifts.
And it doesn't matter how bad it is. Like,
Actually.
there might be a prize. Sure.
Might be a prize for the worst stool.
Like, we might have to make up categories as we figure this out, like that's a real thing, so if you tell me you're like, I found some wood on the side of the road and I found some nails and someone's tire, and you put it together, awesome.
I would like to see that stool, actually.
I know, right?
Found material stool would be cool.
Anyway,
Any
so
junior
for
event.
December,
I'd go on.
and
Better, the
if
better
you
the.
can't make the meeting, at least send a picture, okay?
Found a school on the side of the road.
I had one I made a couple weeks ago.
We don't have the highest of standards, so.
Just go ahead and bring it in.
Yes, that counts.
All right.
I think,
It's a bit rough. I
I think the requirement is it's gotta be made within this year,
Yeah, okay.
okay? Like, that's it. So if you made one 5 years ago,
What would it go to finish on?
eh,
Count.
sure.
All right. So we're gonna get on with the show. And
One quick question for the group. So I've been tasked with making my parents a sign for this, like a nicer yard, like yard number sign out of wood. I would use cedar, but it turns gray and I don't like it. What people use actually will hold its color and still look nice, you know.
Don't
after
use
you-
wood.
That's the trick.
AZAC.
No, there's no.
Yeah, use AZAC, use a PVC product, there's a bunch of them.
So like AZAC or whatever, I just go like Chelsea Lumber and get some boards. What do I?
They sell sheets, so it's a 4x8 sheets, it's expensive.
Menard
You know,
sells,
or 5/4
Menard,
by
yeah.
Menard
10
sells
yes.
Small.
white, it's royal.
It's
which-
cellular PVC, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
cellular PVC trim. So Menard sells that as well.
But that's what you use.
And 4x8 sheets are not so.
You get a
Oh,
1 by
they sell it
or
in trim
planks.
boards, so like I bought.
You can get it by
a
12.
1x6, you know, 1x6, right? And I've been doing. a
but
bunch
you
of
can't paint these things.
You can paint it.
You can't.
Oh, yeah, it'll
Holds
take,
paint well.
yeah, it'll take paint,
Oh, really?
Yeah,
and the edges look reasonable, like
What'd
you
you
can.
pay for the 1x6?
And
How
so
long was it?
And
gosh,
and it's very
the
light.
amount, there was a 5/4 by 6 actually, and
So it's $3,000?
it's like $32 for like a 10-foot piece or something.
Okay.
So just to be contrary, I made one 35 years ago out of cedar. Okay, it was a design in some magazine. I had 2 posts and then a piece across it, cut it out with a router. Now I do it with a CNC, put white paint in it. Every 15 years, I put some white paint on it. I mean, you know,
But it's not a
Do
clear,
that.
it's not a clear
There's
coat.
other ones sizes.
no.
Right, that's the,
To put it out, let it age, it's gray. The white contrast, you see it just fine. Looks fine. I'm just saying,
That's
you know, I'm not saying this is the bad way to go. I think if I knew that, probably do it this way, but
It's not bad.
you know,
Yeah.
it's not the worst thing in the world. Let it go gray.
so,
4x8 sheet?
and that will, that's,
2x4.
and that color is consistent throughout.
Yes. Many
So I can see and see it and order, okay.
Candy pen. Project pen.
I paid $350 for the last 4x8 sheet I bought.
It's expensive, but it works great.
And it's a pain to clean up.
They have a half inch, they have a half-inch 4x8
I
for
know.
$89.
Yeah, it's
No, it is a pain to clean up the shop after you. Because
That'd be awesome.
real small particles and they go everywhere.
And it's static, like it's great.
Static.
Yeah, hey, if you're gonna make it in the summer. If you do it in the winter, it's gonna stick to you like glitter.
Yeah.
All right, and
Man glitter.
like, it just is on everything. I've been cutting it lately because I've been doing a bunch of trim stuff right now. Yeah,
Oh yeah, like when you cut PVC pipe and
Stefan took my thunder.
it's.
No, I could talk about it.
Oh, and there's a smooth side and a wood grain side. Wood grain,
So
and because it's,
Stefan stole my thunder originally. I don't know if I'm gonna be as good for the oops minute,
Or it's bad.
but I've been trying to get into dyeing veneer. You know, and
it's the jelly.
it's kind of crazy. There are different ways you can do it. One that you use, vacuum is really the way to go, but vacuum, I don't know, it can be tricky. Because you can get all kinds of, it depends on the species, I'm using transient with denatured alcohol. So go to the other picture first.
Is that your pressure cooker?
Oh, yeah, yeah, okay, well, my first, yeah.
FBI showed up.
Got a prize. So anyway, my first attempt was I was using that gasket and put it in this, used the grape jelly jar. And put the pieces in it and and this is good, it works great. Except the piece can't be any bigger than the mouth of the jar, you know, so I then went to the local Goodwill. And got a pressure cooker for $6. Figuring that's set for pressure, I mean, vacuum should be fine. Put it around, drill a hole in the top, put that black tape there is over the little light that they, or whatever event they put on there, so. And it worked fine the first time. Second time didn't work for shit. I figured out that it was leaking around the rim. So for some reason, the first time it went, so I had to go get the Irwin clamps. And don't have to be tight, just had to be a little snug. And it worked. And then I ended up, then I was using went to the dollar store and they got these, I think they sell them for dog dishes. And they're stainless steel, put some trans tin in it with some, denatured alcohol, put it in there. 10 minutes later, yeah. What I found is you gotta submerge the veneer. And I know I did this a decade ago where you use a longer tube and you set it in there and it would pull it up. Whatever reason, times changed, didn't work. So now I've got into submersion. I got another.
Have you tried spraying it?
Huh?
I'm just wondering, could you just spray it?
No, well, it doesn't go all the way through. So the problem is then when you go to sand the veneer, you're gonna have the original species color coming through. So what you really want to do is you want to get the dye all the way through.
So because you're trying to pull it through the wood.
Right,
All right.
yeah. So.
Have you tried pressuring it?
Is that?
Have you tried putting pressure on it? Pressure it, the way they.
I got vacuum, but I just got a little pancake compressor, so from the pressure side, I'm not so equipped, you know, and.
They only use about 5 PSI, 0.5 PSI when they do pressure treated lumber.
Yeah, well, and I know all the people that do turning, when they do their blanks for the pens and all those, that's all done pressure.
Yeah.
But, I want to do it vacuum and.
Do you need like a lot of vacuum, you think, or do you think a little vacuum would work?
I'm
wondering-
using the vacuum I use for my veneering.
I'm
It's like,
wondering if you could get away with like a shop vac is what I'm wondering.
oh,
I don't know. I'm not sure how much it needs.
well, here's the good lead in. I tried this, but this is what I did with so what I did was I had the mixed up. And I put the vacuum underneath it. I had one of those pods from Rockler cells.
Yeah.
And it didn't go all the way through.
Oh.
It pulled it somewhat, and the blue, it pulled it somewhat, but it doesn't do it as well. I've got another technique coming up.
What's the temperature?
Maybe another disaster might actually, I think the next.
The temperature for it?
What's the temperature when you do it?
Room temp?
Room temp, well, it was probably 70 degrees, yeah. What, this was just done in the last, done in the last month, in the last
I think you should try Bob's idea and pressurize it.
I can do that. I got a pressure vessel.
Yeah.
Is there
Pressure.
would something besides trans tint work better, like a water-based dye, you think?
Transit's pretty good.
Transtant's good. The bad thing about water-based is that the water causes.
Oh, right.
Put it in acetone or alcohol and.
Yeah, well, I mean, if there was another alcohol, I would try it, but, denatured alcohol seems to work the best for me. So. Yeah.
Cool.
So we're gonna start out with, for the topic, kind of like the beginner side of it. And, has anybody, done doors with like just a table saw? Kicker doors or anything like that? Okay. What are your thoughts on that?
Were you happy with when they were done?
No,
Okay.
I should have. The like alignment, like running the really long. Like dados and like, I didn't use a stack, so I had to make like 3 passes to make the right width, and it was just like. I thought I had labeled everything and I was running everything correctly, and then during the dry fit, it was just like. Like the short pieces were slightly misaligned to the long pieces, like.
So like for the panel, you mean?
This is the style of the rails, right? Like I tried to like, I dry fit the panels and then like the corners didn't match up. So it was
Oh,
like,
Does everybody know the terminology when it comes to a door? Should we define that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do that quickly. So
definitely do that.
grab a door and show you. So here's the door. Styles, vertical, right? And with a cope and stick door, which this is, the stiles run all the way through and the rails, horizontal, have a sticking, cope cut that copes into the sticking cut on the stiles. The panel in the center, right? And then there's any variation of this. You can have cross rails, you can have cross stiles, you can have raised panels, but terminology wise, stiles, rails, cope and stick, or miter. And miter, we don't have an example of, but I think y'all know what a miter is.
like a
So-
picture frame, essentially a picture frame.
It's essentially a picture frame. So today is all about making those kind of panels.
and that's the 5
And-
parts.
and it-
You got 2 rails, 2 stiles and a panel. That's your 5 parts.
And then,
And the way you remember is that rail is closest to rung, like rung on a ladder.
Or you think about just a fence rail,
A railroad rail.
a railroad rail. You ride the rails and you get style goes up and down.
and this is basically a shaker door, right?
That's a beveled shaker.
Beveled shaker door. Yeah. I mean, the real shakers, this would have been straight up, and down, but it's got just a slight.
There's one.
There's a real shaker.
And we'll get into the details.
And you can do it, the tabletop, but it just takes,
Oh, there is a no, even.
If you've done it a few times, it's pretty fast, actually.
Yeah, I used to stack dado and I made my garage doors, which were like 10 feet tall and 4 feet wide.
Nice.
You know, out of 2x stock. And it worked well. And then I just used a skill saw to cut the corners.
Check up.
Yes. Oh, yeah, so I actually make a true door. What I did is I just used the basic style and just did 4 facing 2 ends and 2 sides. And made my kid a toy box. And so it's got the same basic design, but it's not hinged or anything. But I thought it went really well because I was using 1/4 inch, it might have been Luan. Like a center panel. I was able to just do like a pass and a half on my table saw. And fit perfectly and went super fast.
so I've done one door that, I used to use pocket holes.
Yeah.
So I did a butt joint. I didn't even put the groove for the panel. I didn't even do that yet. I just put that in. Put them together, did pocket hole screws. Fine. I took it apart. And then I used my router and I used the slotting bit. And then I just cut the panel with the little roundy ends. Because it turns out the sander's really easy at that. And then it looked fine. You only know when you open it.
So let me talk about this door, which is done that way. It's actually pretty simple to do. I wouldn't make a garage door with this because the joinery is not good enough. So this is just a long groove in the stile. And then a tenon that comes out from this. So the easy way to make this is you start with the stiles. You put a dado head in, a 1/4 inch. You want to get, it's easy if you try and make it right in the middle. So the best way to do is start with the stiles. Cut one side, flip it around, do the other side. Now you know that's centered in the piece. So do both, then you got both stiles done. Then for the rails, you'll put it flat on the machine with the dado head. Figure out exactly what this distance is, so tweak up for this distance. And then in terms of height, tweak up on the height. So cut this side and cut the other side. Does it fit? No, it doesn't. A little bit more. Does it till you just fits. Once it's fit, you do all of them. I did 20 doors like this. So once it was set, keep on doing it. Then finally, you do your panel and you fit your panel to fit your groove, which might be a little more than a 1/4 inch groove. So that's why you might want to do that last. Then it's pretty easy to glue together, cut the ends off. You know, you can get it pretty accurate. You can do it done just with a table saw, nothing else. I did these, you know, for Blum hinges. I did these on with the Shaper Origin I have, but you can just do those with a drill press. There's nothing wrong with that. It works just as well. So pretty easy, you know, make a door. The only thing, and I think we'll talk about that later, is this is a solid wood panel. Finish your panel before you put it in. Okay, because otherwise you'll find that sometime or other you'll have an edge that looks bad. So I put a dot of glue on here when I put it together, put a dot of glue here when I put it together. The rest of it floats in the slot.
How do you make the panel so thin?
What makes the panel?
How do you make this panel so thin?
This particular case, I ran it through, I have a drum sander. Okay, you can, but 1/4 inch you can do on a planer. There's no reason you can't do on a planer. Don't take a big cut, you know, when you get close, take, you know, just little cuts. In fact, again, it's the same sort of thing. Your groove, because you've done it both sides, it might not be centered, your grooves be a little more than a 1/4 inch. So leave your panel thick and then just, you know, sneak up on it, keep putting it to the plane until you get it right. You know, and then you got it.
For my door, the mortise was 3/8 inch wide.
Yeah.
And the tenons were 2.5 inches long.
Yeah.
You know, and then they were locked in place with a towel.
Yeah, well, clearly, you can do this method, and there are ways that you could reinforce it. You could put dominoes in it, you could put biscuits in it along with this methodology. You could make longer tenons. There are a lot of things you could do, which I think people are going to talk about. But if it's a small door, you know, nothing's going to happen to this door in a cabinet. It's going to hold up just fine.
The other thing you can do while we're talking about the backs is if you don't want to make them thin. I don't know if I don't think I brought one where. Oh, I did. Cool. Hold on. So this is a. Oh, no, wait, no, I didn't. Yeah, we'll use this one. So make believe this was flat on the face, not raised, but it's thicker on the back. So you can make the panel thicker and then relieve it when you put it in on the back so that the panel's, you know, beefier, but still flat on the front, which this isn't, but that's common too.
Or use.
Oh, yeah, the thing with plywood is you got to dial your groove in really carefully, you know, but yeah, that's always good.
So Dave, just understanding, so when you said solid wood and to keep it from made the like that, you get a lot more room to move just by making it the same.
So I've got some pictures down the road. That's not glued in because it's solid wood. So that's a flat panel, right? Which you can make solid, you can make out of MDF or plywood. If it's plywood, you can glue it in, which is a really good technique because it's not going to move. And then you don't have to worry about that finish line showing up as it moves seasonally. So I don't like making flat panel doors with solid wood. Right, so if you want a really nice veneer, you can veneer your own, but glue them in, you know. Or if you're gonna do raised panel, they're gonna be painted. These could be glued in too, that's MDF, right? So like, it's nice to glue them in, it makes a really solid door.
The gluing makes it more
Makes it solid.
solid.
When you can't glue it in is when it's a solid piece of wood, it's gotta move, and then you have to figure out how to look. Like Brent said, right?
You can actually use Spaceballs.
Yeah, exactly.
Spaceballs work fine.
Yeah, so Spaceballs are little rubber balls that fit in those grooves and they suspend the panel and give it some shock so that it can move against the Spaceballs and keep it down.
Balls, you know, I just put it down. Let it, it's not a problem. All work is fine.
The risk is do nothing.
It could.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of sneaking up on the groove, then your groove is not necessarily the right size. And if you have a 1/4 inch cutter, your plywood's not going to be a 1/4 inch, it's going to be less than 1/4 inch.
So you got that problem. So you've got to, as Dave was saying shortly, and I think say a little bit more, you need to, do something to get exactly the right size for the 1/4 inch. For the 1/4 inch. Will wrap, so that's why what I did was cut the grooves, cut all of that, so I knew exactly what the groove was, and then use the planer to get just to the right point where it's going to be a tight fit, but not too tight, and then that doesn't rattle. I mean, it's going around, doesn't rattle.
Isn't the groove the first thing you're establishing when you're
Right.
doing the styles? So you could just make it if you want. Yeah, if you want from the get-go.
Correct, but the method that I have of centering it makes it a lot easier by cutting out.
But can't you do
both
that? I
directions.
mean, you can center it and make it the.
If you get it, yeah, it's hard, you make that the right center. And not, it's not even.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely, you can do what you're saying,
Sure,
yeah, just trade off some,
Yeah.
which way do you want to pay the pipe?
The upside of using the table saw is you can fit the panel width, right? Because you could center it, like Brent said, you could just sneak up. Is.
Yeah.
On multiple parts.
Right.
And that's why pro cabinet shops don't do that,
Sure.
because it takes forever. But the downside of using tooling and trying to match panels is the tooling has to match exactly, and like, that's not easy. Most of the tooling's metric. Most of the material is, well, most of it's metric. Or more that's imperial. So you get 1/4 inch and you get 6-meter panels and you go, 6 millimeters 1/4 inch. No, it's not.
And it rattles.
And it rattles. So, that dance is a little tricky, but there's ways around it. Yeah.
You also get variation from stock, from different lots.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna buy the plywood, then make certain you buy enough for your mistakes and.
Absolutely.
You'd never make that mistake, would you?
Not anymore.
I rebuilt my kitchen.
Yeah.
I built a lot of doors and I used this.
They work great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to leave the right amount of room for space balls, because when you assemble it, you're kind of fighting them just a little bit. You're kind of
That's what the
compressing.
clamps.
That's what the clamps are doing, but yeah, I mean, it prevents the door from blowing itself apart seasonally. Yeah, space balls are amazing. What's funny is they sell a space ball inserter. You see this? I'm curious, it's like this hydraulic gun that shoots space balls into the groove, and it's like $5,000 or something. But for cabinet shops, you buy a 55-gallon drum of space balls and you buy one of those things.
It used to be you had baseball were just round. Now I see where they've got.
Okay, some of the panels, right, the barrels.
Yeah.
That, yeah.
So in the email in the introduction, the topics are sort of divided as in like beginner, intermediate, advanced. Is that just because like you get a different level of like efficiency and professionalism as you move to the router type of a thing? Because like I had asked a little bit when I started my project, and a lot of experienced people were just like, I just would always do it on the table saw and never really do the router, but they're more generalists. Is that the impression that
I mean, part of it's not having the right tooling, right? We'll show the tooling to step up to a router table, which is the next, let's call that intermediate, right? With a cope and stick set that makes that profile in one pass. Well, you need a powerful enough router. You need a router table. You need a fence. You need dust collection. You need a multi-$100 cope and stick set, right? You need to die. Right, so not everybody has that. Not everybody wants to invest in it. I guess you brought a cope and stick set.
Here's a rail style open stick.
Yeah, there you go. And then,
But if you want to go beyond shaker.
Oh, that's great.
All you can do is shaker, okay? You want to do anything else? Then you gotta start talking. All you need is table saw. That's all, planer, table saw, or not even planer.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with it. I built lots of cabinets that way. They look good.
So yeah, once you're gonna get up, next thing you know, you got, and thing. You can't use you can't. Okay.
Yeah.
You need a. Gotta take passes, I mean,
Well, you have to use a table. You can't use handheld. to
Right,
be able to do that
No,
either.
no, you need a router table.
You have
you
to have
have
a
a
router table.
fence, you need a router, you need to line it up properly.
Oh, and the coping sled.
Right, so we're gonna get into this, but that's a great point. You need a way to pass, let's make believe that's the cutter, right? You need a way to pass that wood on a flat surface over the cutter perpendicular without moving it. That's another thing you need to figure out, and there's like a million answers on that. I brought a couple, and I'll show you another one, but so there's just stuff to do.
Maybe that's why you need a MakerWorks membership. So
Yeah.
Actually, do they have a cope? I know at the Hawk we do. We've got a cope and stick set on a router table there.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, bro.
I'm sure.
Table,
Yeah.
With the fence.
Well, there you go. So, yeah, I mean. But the good thing about that is it's one pass. Well, no, it's not necessarily one pass, but it fits. So you're not sneaking up on anything. It's like you're registering off the table, you set your heights and you go.
Once you
get it
zeroed
set
in,
up.
Yeah.
So Rob here, so how many doors did you make when you made yours?
So it's actually funny, I made 2 cabinet doors in the shaker style, and then I actually did use a router table to make a door.
No, it's good.
Yeah, so
So
I made
in the
3
shaker
doors.
style, no, it's great though, you made 2. Think about making a whole kitchen, like what are we talking here, 20 doors?
Oh,
80?
Yeah.
Yeah, with side panels and stuff. Yeah.
Okay, my kitchen, 20. Yeah, I'm like, my kitchen's like 10 foot by 10 foot, maybe.
Here you go.
And there's just a pile of shoes in the corner, so yeah. Yeah, but like, that'd be awful, right?
Oh, it'd be a
Making,
nightmare.
like 20 doors and trying to like dial each one in, and each one has to be, set together. But with this, then, you're more likely to always have repeatable cuts.
I'm gonna go the other way. Hey, Steve, you do a lot of doors on your table saw, on your unisaw?
Not too many, no.
Oh, I thought you did some bunch.
I've done them, but
Oh, okay.
I use a cope and stick and a router table and a shaper.
So the next thing is if you're gonna do the raised panel with real wood, or if you're gonna paint it, you can use MDF. It's the other tool using the router cable. Now, the thing about it is, again, to run this thing, you gotta have probably a good 3 horsepower router. And you're still gonna just take it. You're gonna keep indexing it. You're not gonna take the full cut at one time.
Steve, step closer to the microphone.
Oh, now you're not gonna take full cut at one time. You're not gonna do this door like this
On a router.
on a router with one pass. Not a chance in the world.
It's not easier to do it.
This would be the router bit.
That profile might be, well, except it has a tongue,
Yeah.
right? So
Oh, okay.
it doesn't start as the bevel because it goes into the groove.
Okay.
So
Well,
that would be tricky.
You could do it vertically.
You could do it
Do it vertically with
vertically.
an angle.
It would take some setup.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
it's
you
a
can do it.
little more dangerous to do.
Well, I mean, it's just the fact is you gotta be. Gotta be patient, you gotta make sure, you wouldn't want to, they would never do this in a production shop.
Yeah.
Then we're gonna talk about shapers and stuff, then you're gonna get into why they
Yeah.
exist.
Well, let's go back to beginner for a minute, right, before we close that out. So. Again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with building shaker doors on a table saw. It's a great method to do it. You could dial it into the width, but you also can just take boards and stick them together, biscuits, dominoes, pocket screws, fill the back of the,
So
wait, there's no.
I built a thing to hold a Coleman lantern, and it was just a bunch of 5-panel doors, like that's all it was. That's just kind of how it was. I just dominoed it, the whole thing. I had a domino, it was just so much faster. And then once again, came back in with the groove cutter and did that. It's probably one of my.
It's a
favorite objects.
reasonable approach, right? You could buy a grooving cutter cheap. They've got bearings on them,
Yeah.
cut your groove, you're done.
Yeah, really affordable. I could have also came back later and
Have to worry
marked
about
each
the
side
corners.
done on a table saw.
Yeah.
Granted, I used dominoes, so it's super expensive, like I
Yes,
said.
about that.
You can always borrow others, because I borrowed a lot of people before I bought my own.
And Brad makes a good point. If you use the grooving cutter, right? when you're-
Fly cutter or
Oh,
something.
yeah, we could pull one up.
Yeah.
When you're going around the corner, you're getting a radius groove. So you gotta take your panel and chop the corner off, right?
It's not
So
a
it'll
big deal.
fit.
So the first time I cut the panel, then the second time I was like, I'm gonna be fancy.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, so I used a chisel. And I just chiseled that because it's already like super hidden. So as long as you don't screw up one of the show faces, And I kind of like cut it, I don't know, describe it like this, so that way it's more open. So just a little extra open in those corners, which is fine. It just made it, I didn't want to deal with the panels.
Yeah.
And it was really small, so the rays was gonna be hard to hide and, it could show, I get a little air gaps in the corners.
And again, there's always miter doors too, right? Like if you don't need cope and stick, then miter doors, you could go and buy molding. And cut a groove on the molding on your table saw.
Heck, a miter saw.
Yeah, and then miter the edges and stick it together. That's another approach to making doors.
And if you have a glue in panel, that'll do fine, especially.
Absolutely. Yeah. Otherwise, you should reinforce the corners.
Otherwise, you need to do something with the
Yeah,
corner.
because glue alone isn't great on the miters if they're, but I mean, that's a perfectly reasonable way to make doors. And doesn't take special equipment, right? Beyond that. If you are gonna use a table saw, one thing they sell, so the typical blade that we use on table saws is ATB. It's an alternate tooth bevel, right? So if you look at the teeth, they kind of, every other tooth does this.
Every
And
third tooth.
Every third tooth, yeah, and then there's a flat tooth.
Yeah,
right?
Sometimes.
That's.
Sometimes, right? They make blades that are flat top, which are fantastic for doing grooves, because you get a really
For every
nice,
kind of joint.
yes, for every kind of joint.
FTG, flat top grind.
Yeah, so that's worth having that kind of blade if you're gonna,
Or a dado,
Get it
or a
to
dado
this.
set, which would be that way, that'll be flat.
Potatoes.
what's that? Dados are typically that way, yeah. Yeah. So anything else anybody wants to talk about on kind of like, pre-router table doors and panels?
Anything to think about for wood selection? Thoughts?
Quarters, well, it's funny, Bob Daniels taught me this. When Bob worked on my house for years, and I remember we were buying wood and I was making stuff. And one day Bob said to me, never use air dried lumber for doors, ever, right? He's nodding.
Yeah,
And I was like, it's been dried for 10 years, it's
I
fine.
just got burnt at it recently.
He's 100% right. You want kiln dried wood for rails and stiles. Air dried wood doesn't have the lignin set, it will move. And lo and behold, many of the panels I made that are beautiful are now just slightly kicked, because over the seasons, they all move. So I stick with kiln dried wood for rails and stuff, not necessarily for the panels. So you can probably get away with panels that are, air dried if they're well dried, right? Like you're not going to use green wood, but that was a lesson, one of many that I learned from Bob on that, and definitely. And then I would take it further. Now I only use riff sawn or quarter sawn for because it's stable. So it's hard to find, it's more expensive, and I buy 5/4 and then go down to 20 millimeter rather than 3/4 for the doors, to give them a little beat.
Well, if you want to see that movement, make inset doors.
Yeah.
It's unforgiving.
It's unforgiving. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess another question I would say, what if you're dealing with something like an outdoor kitchen or a
Oh.
boat? What would you use then? I'm not doing this, I'm just throwing ideas out here.
Teak
No.
or a good mahogany.
Okay,
And an amazing finish.
I wasn't sure if I do it, you've done some screen doors, I remember you did like,
I've done cedar, I've
but
done vertical green Doug fir.
I thought those were like over a plywood substrate or something.
Oh, sure. Well, you can, yeah, so you can laminate a stable substrate
I wasn't.
and waterproof, yeah. But if you're doing solid, I mean, I think Doug fir is good. Like straight vertical grain Doug fir.
Is there a point where air dried catches up with kiln dried?
Never.
No, because the lignin bonds aren't set. Like that's the thing. This is a realization that took me a long time to come to. Like it might be dry, but when you put wood in a kiln, right? One, all the bugs die, which is nice. But two, the lignin bonds set and they can never unset. That's why you can't steam bend kiln dried lumber.
That's what I was gonna say.
Right? So like there is a chemical and physical process that happens when you bring wood to a certain temperature over a certain amount of time. It just makes it more stable. So, yeah.
It takes on moisture and it sheds it much faster from what I know. If it's kiln dried.
Yeah, so,
that's why some flooring now is tortified,
right,
Right.
exactly.
because it makes it
It-
harder and it lasts so much longer,
So
because
much
now you
longer.
can keep the windows open in the house.
Yep.
And not ripple your floor.
Yep.
What is tortified?
So the wood, it's almost like kiln drying, but it's done under pressure with moisture, so it controls it.
Without
The
ice.
moisture, it controls the moisture content of the wood while it's adjusting the temperature. It's does it too, so if you were to look at some of like a Fender guitar now, you can buy a maple neck guitar that's tortified, it'll look like the color of caramel.
Yes.
It's
It's
a higher temperature and it's without oxygen, so it doesn't combust.
Thoroughly
Yeah.
modified wood.
You can't,
50 degrees.
you cannot do this in your kitchen oven.
Well, you can try.
You will set the oven on fire.
You do it once.
And you turn your oven into a fire.
You gotta put it, and then you need to do new doors for the cabinets.
Yeah, you might need your doors stretched out.
You were selling that for decks for a long time.
Yeah, tortified wood.
Because. Like you said, it was through the caramel colors. Yeah.
Okay, move to the next one.
Yeah, so why don't we go to intermediate? So I think intermediate now, you're stepping into a little more tooling. You're stepping into a router table, like we're talking about, coping stick, router bits that give you that match set.
And intermediate is making, probably someone making a kitchen, full kitchen for themselves maybe.
Or a nice vanity, who knows, right? Just
Or not shaker.
Huh?
I said, or not shaker.
Yeah.
or not.
Like I raised panels.
So who's done that? Who's done, I guess, non-shaker doors or and maybe a fewer, a larger quantity? John right here, he did a kitchen.
Yes. And the question is?
No, you did it, right? Saying like you pointing out that, so you're, what was your methodology?
Making the doors?
Yeah, like you did it with router, right?
Yes, yeah, there's jigs you put together and there's also usually you have a tear out preventer piece when you're passing it through. Those kinds of things.
So these are like, what you get, if you want to do an OG instead of a shaker, this is the set would look like. If you look at it, you got this little mark, these are the match sets, one for rail, one for style. And you got a door here that, yeah, kind of.
Yes, grab a door.
Here, this one.
It might not be
Yeah,
the
this,
most popular pattern.
this is close, but this is like the OG style, one of the styles, there's like, what is it, 100 different styles.
Oh, there's a lot, yeah, there's a lot of different
Yeah,
profiles.
but again, you get the half round and the recessed and a little bit of
It's basically not shaker.
not shaker.
It's not shaker.
Well, it cuts, you understand, it cuts the whole thing. It'll cut the groove for the panel and we'll cut the shape for the front. And it'll cut a shape for the back, which is usually flat. So it's gonna cut all of that at once. At the same time, you probably have a nice diagram you're gonna bring out. They'll show better than my waving my hands.
The internet works. Here we are.
Yeah, the only thing about these bits is if you, unless you get a high end set. They'll come, and I think that one does come. But actually, I think the easiest thing in my world is that after you got it cut, then you just shave the back of the panel, fit the slot.
Can everybody see, can you guys see that? So the two bits give you a matched cut, right? That's the whole theory. So the downside of these bits, one, they're expensive. As router bits go, they're expensive, right? And two, they're kind of small, right? So the diameter, because they're so small in diameter and they're taking a lot of wood out, they have to run really fast, right? So you have to run them 18,000, 21,000 RPM in a big router. And to your point, well, the other thing, because they're small, the angle of the cut as it's coming around the wood it's trying to blow out the back of the wood, right? If you think about that cutter deep into that wood, it's trying to blow it out. So you, like John said, you need to back it up with a board that's gonna take that load, or it'll blow out the back of that part, and you'll end up with a piece of scrap, right? So the reason why professional shops use shapers is because they're just bigger and the cutters are just bigger. So the angle of attack becomes more of a straight cut on the edge rather than a blowout cut as it's leaving the edge.
And do they run them slower?
And well, it depends, like, yeah, yes, as you increase the diameter of the cutter, you slow down the spindle. And of course, the spindles are much more powerful, so you can do it in one pass. Whereas unless you have a 3+ horsepower router, you're probably not doing this in one pass, I'm guessing. Did you do them in one?
I was 2.5 horsepower.
2.4, and you were able to do it in one.
That's right.
What species?
I did it. I
forgot what species.
Oh,
you're
man,
looking for.
this I did 12 years ago. So
Yeah.
But I went through it slow.
Went through it slow.
You didn't use any kind of power feeder, just hand?
Pardon me?
You didn't use any kind of power feeder, just?
No, well, I have a jig that hung on to the piece.
Doing the
nose
styles is
against
not
a fence, and as the thing passes over the blade, it's solidly placed. It's not moving at all.
doing the styles is not a problem. You won't have blowout on the style because you're going along the wood. So doing the style is not a problem. It's doing the rails that are the problem. That's where you get the blowout, because you're going cross grain and it's, well, Dave's gonna show it.
So let's make believe that these cuts were made with that set, right? You've got the coping cut and the sticking cut. The sticking cut is the long cut on the styles, well, and on the rails, but like we're talking about, it makes a match set. So, this is that's your profile. The cutter does all the work for you to give you the groove, the filled groove at the end, and to make all the geometry. But the key is, like we're talking about, you need, when you're doing these cuts, which you do first, you've got to figure out how to pass this over that cutter. So let's make believe that's the fence of the router, right? You've got to pass this over that cutter at a perfect 90 degrees. It can't be like this, right? It's got to be straight. And it's got to stay flat during the cut, or else everything's going to be off. It's got to be totally flat. So if the board's warped, it's not going to work well. And if you notice, and this is an important point, it's removing the entire end, right? Because the depth of that tongue is critical to filling the groove. So now think about it on a router. Here's your fence. You start the cut, you go over the cutter, it's taken off the entire end. And you now need to keep going. So now you're not against the fence after the cut. So what you need is a way to hold the piece through the cut, where the thing that you're holding it with is registered on the fence, not the part you're cutting. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of answers to that. So there are these jigs that you can buy, there's commercial ones, and they're not that expensive. You buy, Woodpecker sells them, and
Woodpecker is expensive.
yeah, they're probably expensive.
Yeah, Infinity makes a good one.
Infinity makes one, and they're basically like,
There's a simpler one, I think, that like Rockler sells.
Yeah, Rockler sells.
It's like, I think it's less than $100.
yeah, there you go. And what does it do? It holds the piece perpendicular, and it's registered against the fence, and it lets you ride the piece through. And when you're done, you should not be contacting the fence on the cut, because it removes the entire end.
So when I did this, I just used the miter gauge on my router table.
Yeah, so you can use the miter gauge.
So,
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, yeah, the thing about using the miter gauge, it's nice if the thing that's holding the piece is also applying pressure downwards.
Yeah, you make a sled.
Exactly. So you could build a sled. That's another thing, right? You can basically make your
I
own
built my own.
There you go.
With clamps. that hold
With
it.
clamps.
And
You know the
it's-
Destaco clamps, those like flip clamps? You totally make your own.
The trouble with just using a miter is you want to put a backup board in it. Now you're trying to hold two pieces,
Right.
both of which are trying to move away from the cutter as the cutter goes in. So you really want to have it socked down, socked together, in order to do it.
You can have a sacrificial fence on your miter fence. That will be the thing.
You pretty much have to.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
then you don't have to have anything special.
Yes, yeah.
Sacrificial. fence attached.
Oh, actually, so here, everyone see this picture?
No, larger.
Sorry, let me click on that. So again, we're talking about just stuff that you need to consider if you're gonna use your router table, right? I mean, it's, you know, all. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I don't know exactly what they're using to push that through, but it's as simple as a little sled with a Destaco clamp holding that part down. There you go.
And actually, it was some article in one of the woodworking magazines on how to make those.
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, this is all doable, right? I mean, you buy the cope and stick set and you.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
One of the things you want to do with those tackle clamps is put two of them on there, so it doesn't pivot off.
So it doesn't pivot. That's a great point. There's a ton of force, right? So as that cutter is ripping through the end grain of this piece, it's wanting to kick it all over the place. And if it moves, your cut's done, right? You will not get a good fit if it moves at all. So you got to figure out how to isolate it and back up the cut. And so the other thing is, you always do the end cuts first, because then when you come back and do the sticking cut with the other cutter, right? Because it's a match set, it'll clean up any tear out that took place, you know, but once again, you're removing the whole edge. So now you've got a similar problem, right? Where you're passing this along the fence. And here you go, you're passing along the fence. Oh, and the edge disappears on the piece that you're cutting. So now it's gonna want to snipe into the fence if you're using the fence as your reference. So you need to figure out a way to move that thing across the cutter without allowing it to move.
Some of them have a bearing, so you don't have to worry about that.
No, you
No,
do.
You do have.
You do. It's going to take, there's nothing to register against if you take the whole edge
The
out.
very bottom edge. Sometimes you don't take the bottom edge, just take the top. So you have a,
I don't use router.
Yeah.
So do you know, actually, where's that set?
There are two routers.
What does the sticking one
There
look
are
like?
two bearings on this.
Yeah.
There's one on each.
My understanding is you always align the bearing with the fence, right? So you put a straight edge on it.
Yeah.
Is it, John, is that what you did for the sticking cut?
or you can leave it.
Oh, with this,
Leave it slightly
stuff does,
proud.
Oh, there is a bearing on
Yeah.
that.
you gotta run this against your stock, come in for what you need to do.
So you don't use the fence at all?
You don't have to.
Well, you probably want the fence to be slightly, the cutter to be slightly proud.
So
You
I
offset
think-
the
I think
fences?
I did this once on a shaper, but it was a smaller shaper at
Yeah.
Phil's workshop, and I think you offset the fence so that it comes off. It comes off on the out feet, you know, like a joint,
Right.
right? So-
Yeah, like a joiner.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you offset the fence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or just have the bearing slightly proud of the fence and.
right.
It
And
doesn't
you
matter
just use the
if-
fence for support, but let the bearing ride on the wood.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I found that you have to really have, you still wanna have a fence,
Yes.
because the bearing is,
Well, you got to start the cut
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
right? So you
Yeah.
need some support to start the cut.
Yeah.
You know, the other good thing about that too, with the bearing is you could do a curve. So if you wanted
Right.
Yeah.
arch top doors.
Yeah.
I suppose.
The only problem with lying the very proud of the fence is you get a little bit of a snipe, but it hits it first, it kicks it back out,
Right.
you know, and then if you've got any kind of opening at all for that cutter,
Yeah.
there's a good chance the leading edge could dip into that opening, so you do have to have some kind of a sled. I mean, I've taken something as simple as a piece of plywood,
Yeah.
just hold it against, but I went out and bought a sled because it just wasn't worth losing my hand over.
No.
Or you can bury, have a sacrificial fence and bury it in the fence. But I agree with you.
Could you just make?
It's
them
better,
take a
it's
look
better
at
to do
one
the whole
cut
thing.
them
Well,
afterwards?
again, we're talking
No,
about
because you've done the
styles.
cope cuts first.
Oh.
Right. See, that's the
He's
hard
talking about
part.
The style cut though.
I'm
Because,
thinking style.
right. So on the styles, yes, the
No,
styles
not the
always
style
cut
cut.
long and then trim them. It's the style cuts. It's the sticking cuts on the rails.
You make that cut.
You have one shot
Yeah.
because you've already cut the
That's
piece to length. So now you've got to get this perfect. And I'll show you how I do it on the shaper, because I don't use the fence on the shaper. There's a much easier approach, but you can't do it on a router table. But anyway, back to the router. So
You do it back.
what?
Why can't you do the terrible dangerous cut and then the?
You're gonna get blowout. So what happens is, it's a good question, and every time I've tried it, it generally fails. But here's why. It's actually a really good question. So look at that geometry, right? In this case, it's a very simple bevel. Okay, so let's say you did this first. Now you come in and you do this cut. This cut's gonna be fine, because you're gonna get blowout on the backside here, which is gonna get trimmed off on the door. Now you do this one. You can't protect that edge. Right, unless you make
Unless
a
you have
very
scrap,
specific,
the last
well,
time
but
you
the
do it.
scrap needs to be the mating profile.
Right.
Right, so which you could do. I've done that, it works fine. It takes work and thought. But if you can match the profile, you're safe to do it. But best practice is to do your cope cuts first and then come back and do your sticking cuts. You know,
And if it's taking off material, do you have to set up your router table for on the cope cuts first? Like, because to get the length right, so you have the right width door. so you're not just-
that's exactly right. Right, so if you know you're removing the whole edge, you kind of have to know how much you're removing.
Yeah.
And then you have to subtract accordingly, or oversize the width. Right, so like if you're making doors with 2.5 inch rails and stiles, make them 2 3/4. And then when the whole door is done, trim the doors. That's a better approach than trying to, oh, I've got 2.5
I'm
inch stock.
talking about the length, and then because you're gonna remove the end, and if you're taking off a quarter
Eighth,
versus.
Yeah,
an eighth,
16th, whatever, right?
Yeah, 16.
Right.
Like, that might change it, so.
Yeah.
And then, so they might not be exactly 2.5, but who cares, kind of approach?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So they may not be 2.5, but your eye won't see the difference, right?
Yeah.
So that's typically the
You can't see a
approach.
16th across the kitchen. Well, maybe my
Well,
kitchen you can, but not here.
Some people can, yeah.
That's it.
So
My kitchen, you can touch all surfaces at
It's
once.
a percentage of the kitchen.
yeah, that's it. That's it. So anybody have any other thoughts, questions? I mean, for
Just one thing.
Yeah.
You wanna cut, and I forget which one first, either the rail or the style. There's an article in one of the magazine, Wood or Woodsmith or something. I probably still have that. We can put it up on the
Yep,
site. And that's
sure.
something for folks to get other perspective on this. So.
Yes. And the other thing too, to John's point about like order of execution, once you're set up to make one of these cuts, you want to do all of them. Because getting back to that setup is a bit of a nightmare. And you want to make a setup block, right? So when you're prepping your stock, prep all of your stock at one time. Don't skip, don't do half of it and come back. Because you're setting your planer up and like where you land on your planer dictates the thickness, and the difference in thickness will show in the pieces. So like do it all at once and make extra, right? Like if you've got really short rails on a couple doors, make extras because you might blow one out and then you're stuck and having to go all the way back and start over. So, just there's a in the process of building a large amount of doors, think through the process and be smart about, I'm on this stage, I'm going to complete the stage, and I'm going to leave myself room to make mistakes down the road. That takes a little practice, but it's worth doing because these things are a little finicky.
Yeah, because the other thing here is that, going back to what Dave just said, because you're gonna do all of one, then you're gonna come down and change tools.
Yes.
And you gotta use gotta use a piece now to try to set the other one in there. So you wanna take an extra, run it, and make sure that that height is right.
Yeah.
And, depending on your router table and how big the little
The opening.
is, it may be, just drive you nuts afterwards, because then you got this damn overlap on each of them. But isn't that why you get 2 router tables and 2 routers?
Well, no, that's a great point. So
one set, you're never gonna get it.
I'm on a bunch of forums with like cabinet makers, right? And there's a lot of debate about this with shapers because a lot of the guys out there, they're like, we've got 4 shapers and we never change them, right? So we got one for cope cuts, one for stick cuts, one for panels, one for general use. And the first person that touches those things gets shot, right? I take a different approach. My approach is I want one shaper that allows me repeatability in a heartbeat. But and I've actually had this debate with a couple of guys, and a couple of them have sold 4 shapers and bought one. But it's an investment. You can decide what.
Yeah, but Dave, you're in a different situation too. You're one person responsible for the machine and no one's touched it.
That's exactly
So when I ran a shop.
Yes.
We did that, we had 5 or 6. machines.
Yes.
that were Set up that way.
Yeah.
I set them up.
If you have $10 an hour guys, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, and so I would just tell everybody, this is what you're doing on that machine.
Yes.
But if something happens, I fix it.
Totally.
You don't.
Yeah.
mess
Don't
with the
touch it.
machine, Don't touch the
Yeah.
machine.
I just want to go back to something you said too. It's not just the setting of the cutters, but you want all of your material to be the same width. If not, some cases, you're actually flipping one piece on the other side. And so if they're not the same thickness, everything goes screwy. So
Yes.
that's a reason to say, when you're preparing your material, prepare all of the material so it's
Yes.
exactly the same width.
And it needs to be S4S, meaning you need parallel straight edges everywhere, right? Because
Actually, six, you really want.
6, except
Yeah.
the styles. The styles you
Yeah.
can let run long, but yeah, that's right. So anyway, on to the panels, right? So we talked a little bit, yeah.
Before we move on.
Yeah.
You just brought up everything needs to be straight and parallel. And that's the what needs to happen. The challenge I got, that I had to solve was, how do I do that?
Yeah.
You know, because it's real easy to say that and we move on. But then you go home and it's like, okay, how do I get this thing square again? And so the thing that helped me the most in all my woodworking was I started using a digital caliper.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can say I'm gonna measure to the 32nd, but when you start measuring to the thousandth, makes.
And a 32nd is nowhere near
No,
precise
it's like
enough for this.
32 thousandths,
Yeah.
Right.
you know,
That's what white belt sanders for.
well,
That's.
but if you can't afford one. But the advantage is that if you're, you know, if you do all of your stuff in an order, so it's thicker, you run multiple passes, and the final pass, all of it goes through at exactly the same pass. Doesn't necessarily have to be an exact dimension, it just has to be consistent, and then you're gonna go and set up the cutters, so that's fine. Doesn't have to be an exact dimension. Well, what happens if you join all your material in your fence is just a half a degree off?
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, and then you go to glue them together and you got like a boat.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so I mean, that's the sort of thing that.
Absolutely.
Till I kind of got through my stupid head. That, hey, you know, you gotta pay attention to this stuff, so you
Yeah.
gotta really know how to set up your equipment. And to check it before you get started on these projects, because I tell you what, you can burn through a lot of wood
You can.
and be awful disappointed.
And you know, you can get the job done in a regular shop. But this is where better precision, better equipment shows.
The two things, one is the calipers,
Yes.
but also the level to indicate 90 degrees, the little thing that, with 35
Little
bucks.
box level.
Yeah. you
Oh,
put on
yeah.
magnetic One side on your joiner.
Just make sure you zero it out on the flat first. If your floor's not level, you're in
And then the
trouble.
other one is just drafting squares also
Yeah.
sort of get you pretty darn close.
Yeah.
Especially you can buy like a nice 2-foot drafting square for not much
Yeah.
versus going to whatever that red company is.
Oh,
Then spending 300.
Yeah.
Like
The red company, the red company.
expensive.
Woodpecker, that's the company.
Yeah.
But if you get a 2-foot drafting triangle.
Yeah.
But you know, that's not gonna move on.
Yeah. You know, the other thing too is like, we always use wood glue, right? That's what we use, right? PVA. PVA is not gap filling. Like, no matter how much you want it to be gap filling, it's not gap filling. You could use a gap filling glue if you've got issues, and if you color it correctly, you can make up for a lot of crap in your doors, right? So
It's so much better when you do it right.
it's, I don't disagree.
I mean, one of the things that.
But it's,
really
it
helped
can
me
be
was-
frustrating.
Are you familiar with the 5-cut method to square?
Oh, yeah.
I think everybody is.
Yeah.
Has anybody done that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, that was an eye opener for me.
Yeah, totally.
You know, and the other thing I use a lot is I have a little program on my phone, it's called Triangle Solver.
Oh,
You know, you just plug them in and you know whether you're square or not,
oh, right.
you know.
Tell people what the, people may not know what the 5-cut method is, at least they. The
Right.
people, everyone understands that.
So the 5-cut method is, if you want to establish a perfect 90 degrees on any tool, right? Where you have a fence, oops, that's gonna be good for it. Luckily, this is garbage. If you've got a fence and you've got a blade that you want to be perfectly 90, whether it's a table saw, we're using the sled, or it's a chop saw, whatever it is. The 5-cut method is a way to take a scrap piece that's relatively square and make 5 cuts by rotating the piece 90 degrees, where the cut edge that you just cut goes against the fence, then you make a small cut. you cut that edge, you rotate it again, you cut that edge, and on the fifth cut, you cut it a little heavy, so you're left with a sliver, right? That's cut off that edge. And then you measure with a dial indicator or a caliper, the front and the back of that sliver. And the difference in thickness between the front and the back of that sliver is four times how far off the fence is. So it's a way to use geometry effectively to really dial something in.
It magnifies.
It
the error.
magnifies the error.
Magnifies the error 4 times, so you actually can see it.
So like with a sliding table saw, this is the way that it's done, because there's really no other way. You know, imagine you're trying to square something 5 feet long. Like, there's no way you're gonna know with a tape measure, right? So use a caliper on that fifth cut.
The other
Pretty
thing,
handy.
you can't cheat with like a 6-inch board. Your
Right.
square needs, your square piece
Your
of wood
piece needs to be big.
really needs to be proportional if you really want to dial in.
Right. Yep.
It's got to be pretty, you know, at least a minimum of 12, not 15, 20.
Yeah.
Search on YouTube for William Ing.
Yeah, got it.
NG.
Yeah.
And then 5 cut, and that's the definitive.
Yeah.
Sort of.
He's got it.
It explains it really well.
Yeah.
If you have we're talking about a sliding table, so. I plant an 18-inch square to the prospect fence,
Yes,
put a dial indicator along the 18-inch
and
side.
slide down the blade.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
if it's within 1,000 by 18 inches, I think they're pretty good shape.
Yeah, that's I like to check mine with material, because I don't know if I necessarily, I've got a 2-point fence, so I don't have like a solid fence. It's my material rests on 2 points, one at one side and one at the other. And I have to trust that all along the crosscut fence, the 2 points are going to be linear and consistent. So I like to like test it with a 5-foot piece, right? Something where I can make those cuts and see how far off I am. And then the key is making it stay, right?
If
So
you
once-
do a dial indicator from, say, your miter gauge, if your miter is at an angle, it will still parallel.
Yes,
You won't know that in fact
that's right.
your miter gauge is askew
That's right.
from that.
Yeah, your point is when you're passing a board like this, you can still pass it like that straight,
Exactly,
and you're not going to know.
exactly.
And your blade's gonna wobble.
Yeah,
the blade.
yeah, so 5-corner method is much more accurate.
It's a really good approach. So,
Before you go to panel, Dave,
Yeah.
can I,
oh yeah, please.
so this is not the expert one. Right. Okay. I've talked about part of this before. So we've been talking mainly about little doors, right? And we've made some slight references to big doors, but like if you're making a person door, right, you get worried about the connection here and here because of all of the weight of the door, right? And so the traditional way, if we go back to the shaker style, would be to, sorry, I've only got paper, right? To have big, long tenons, like,
Get the paper in the camera view.
big, long tenons. So this would be the bottom of a traditional door, like a 2-panel door would have a big, right? So big double tenons. And you would have the same thing. This one maybe would show it a little bit. So on the top, just like we were seeing on this door, you see the tiny little tenon. But of course, traditionally, this would be a haunch tenon. So it looks exactly the same on the outside, but inside you've got this really big tenon that's actually providing you with the strength. But that's it. That's like a huge door versus a little cabinet door. That's the main, traditionally, that's the main difference. It gets a little bit funny if you're doing it on the middle rail. The easier way to do it would be to cut these long dados, these long grooves along the whole thing. And all the stuff we were talking about before, like you were talking about how hard it is. You know, if you have, even if you like your table saw, right? You were talking about, okay, now we got 80 inches of pretty big material. In this case, this is 1 3/4 inches. We were not going to make 1 3/4 inches, but Johnson's didn't have like whatever the right size of poplar would have been to make a regular size door. So I was like, well, turn out we get upgraded 1.75 because they only had 8-quarter poplar, right? Doing 80 inches to this perfectly across the table saw, you better be confident that you've got no variation up and down. And we're doing it usually 2 people, right? And it's the time where like, if you have not actually gotten your feather board in and like really, get out your rollers, even if you can handle it. Because it's really, we have done quite a few of them now and made most of the mistakes, many of which are solvable, but you create really weird stuff when you just go along that side.
It's a good spot for a slot cutter.
Right, yes. So
After the fact.
So
Wouldn't a second pass
correct. So we have been able to introduce errors across multiple passes or single passes. We've tried various techniques. Grant was talking about, sort of make sure when you cut your grooves that you don't get greedy, even if you got a dado stack and do it in a single pass. It's so valuable to, turn it over to ensure you're in the center. It will depend on what your center material is. So for these big doors, we put the panels out of MDF. This is the other advantage. So 2 things. Make sure you and your partner prefer the simplest style of door aesthetically so that nobody ever asks you to buy a router table or all this stuff sounds completely insane. Right? What a pain. Right? And then the second is, the second is
timeless.
Second,
go and shake.
Second is make sure you want painted doors in your house.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, I look at these pictures of wood doors and I'm like, you would never be able to hide that, right? Cause like, talk about wood is not gap filling. I mean, sure. Exactly. No, we've gotten good. Like the latest round looked pretty nice, but the one other thing you really get in trouble with, and this is what I'm just gonna pass around. Dave, can you search for hammer, horizontal mortise? So those are the things that are. Yeah, do one of the, do that picture. So you can barely see it in this little image, but imagine a cutter that's coming out sideways. And this table, it's hard to imagine in this thing, but this table is going to move flat in and out, side to side, and this bit is going to spin. It's going to point right at your belly button. So like, make sure you are comfortable with your life before you just like start spinning this big thing. But the bummer is that on an 80-inch door, like a 80 by 30 would, or 32 or 36 would be normal house doors, right? This bottom rail with the double tenons will be 8 3/4 inch tall. Right, and the stiles will be 4.5 inches. So you're going to need to make a big, deep 3-inch deep. I think that's what it is. I'm not looking at my picture. Maybe 2, whatever inches deep mortise. The tenon's pretty easy. The mortise is the fun part, right? And so we can use this. And so I just wanted to pass these around. I'm curious whether you need to have big ones, right? And same sort of thing. It does turn out to be much better to do it in multiple passes.
I mean, I understand you have a hammer mortiser, which is
no, I don't have a hammer mortiser. I have hammer jointed planer with a mortiser attached.
Okay, I'm still gonna say it's a little pricey, but you could do this for the punch router, right?
I think at this step, it would start to be challenging.
You want a Domino XL?
Domino XL.
There you go.
Right, there's lots of other ways to do it. I'm just describing this as.
Borrow Dave's Domino XL, that's the right answer. Yeah.
Or anybody can come over and check if they trust their, belly.
That's a thing.
But just like, guess which one of these is a more effective cutter? They're just weird cutters. They also spin backwards, so you like, I keep wondering if I should get metalworking machines, but I just wanted to tell this story about the way in which it changes when you go to really big doors, because most of it is exactly the same, but you do end up really wanting to have some serious tenons, but like the same idea where like having the panel the same size as the tenons, the same size as the haunch tenon on the end, it works out nice. And you can do it, most of it with your table saw, but you get into like If you thought it was fun, a little.
What do you mean, which one works better? They're different sizes.
They are different sizes. Imagine they were the same. So the funny part is that this is the cutter, which is actually a lot nicer. And if I had to look at it, I would have assumed that the other one is a much more effective cutter. In particular, it's all about how it plunges.
Yeah.
And I don't really understand from a machining perspective how it works.
You know, the other thing with shaker, and this applies to exterior doors too, is you don't have to leave that edge,
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
right? You can make a nice molding or go buy a nice molding that wraps the edge. I mean, those are shaker, those are straight shaker with an applied molding that's just mitered in. It's a great look, right? And you can even do it with raised panels, but you need to be careful because you got to kind of start that raise off of the end to give yourself a flat to place that molding. But that's a terrific look. I do a lot of this. and-
The building sitting on top of the rail.
Yes, it's
No, it's not on the top,
It's-
it's inside.
it's sitting on top.
On top of the panel, not on the rail.
It is on top of both. So
Oh,
it's rabbited.
Oh, you got
It's
it.
rabbited around that
It's
corner.
like an edge beam.
It's like, yeah, and then mitered in. Yeah. So I wanted to show if we step up a little bit into how do cabinet shops do this? I mean, Joe has a shaper, Bob is a shaper, I have a shaper, and when we make a lot of doors, things change a little bit in the way it's done for speed mostly. And I brought, despite my better thinking here, I brought my cutter set. So I brought the equivalent set to those bits for my shaper. So there's two of them actually. This is a shaper set through Freeborn. And what they do is there's multiple cutters. So instead of making one cutter, like you saw on that thing, where it's got the bearing and it's like on one shaft, this thing, they give you 6. I only brought 5 because I ran out of space in the little package here. But there's different wings, and you change the configuration of the wings on the spindle to achieve exactly the same thing. But this is a very common cope and stick set for the shaper.
Right, that's all of it, right?
This is it.
That's cope and.
Cope and stick, because depending on which wings you use, gives you cope or stick. $500 nowadays. I think for a freeborn cope and stick set, $500 or $600. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they
I
cost.
think it's like 300 something.
I borrow yours, I don't know.
Yeah, so, and these are great, right? As you can see, mine has a lot of use. Right, yeah, like wore off the paint, like these will do a great job. The key with these is they're fitted. So when you want to have it sharpened, you ship the whole thing back to Freeborn. They sharpen it and fit the cut. So to make sure that cope and stick go together, with no variation at all. And so it's a precision tool, and they sell a whole lot of these, and you can buy different profiles. So that's like a standard.
That's up there, blue one, inch and 3/8 all the way to order.
I think that's right. Or
Which is kind of nice.
this one might only go to inch and 3/8. I don't know. But yeah, they make various, so if you want to do an exterior door, they make ones of these that'll do inch and 3/4, where it's, profiled on both sides with a big groove, right? You can buy all sorts of stuff like this and stack them up on your shape. I brought the one that I use. A 3 horsepower shaper. Could you run this on a 3 horse shaper? 5?
I gave
5.
3 horse that I ran it on. It worked okay.
Maybe if you do a couple
And then
passes,
I went to a
right?
10 horse and the 10 horse just,
10 horses.
it takes everything. And accidents happen 10 times faster.
Yeah, stuff moves quickly. And by the way, with a set like this, you're typically not passing stuff through by hand. You're using a feeder, right? Which has wheels and it grabs the wood and it moves it along for you. Because 1, you get consistent speed, which is really nice. And 2, God forbid you get near that cutter. I mean, this will remove your hand very quickly. So this is not the one I use. I almost never use this. Now I'm using an Italian-made insert set from a company called Zuani. And I brought this to see it because it's really a work of art, right? So these have solid carbide insert tooling that's replaceable. So if I break a knife, I take one out, I put a new one in, and Joe has the same set. And you have the same thing. You've got wing cutters, it's, same. I actually brought a knife, which I'm not going to pass around because this is like $300. But they have little replacements and they register imperfectly. And this thing, the cut quality in one pass is off the charts. If you have a big enough machine to run it, right? It's about $3,000 for this set. Which again, you're investing in tooling, but the difference is remarkable. When I need a profile that they don't sell, because they only have a couple, they have like 4 or 5 profiles. You need custom tooling. And that's where a head like this weighs about 20 pounds, spins at 9,000 RPMs. That's a little scary. And you have matched sets of knives made, solid carbide with steel backing plates. This is from a company called Great Lakes Tooling. All they do is take custom designs and make matched coping stick sets. And it's a great head. There's a couple of companies that do stuff like this. Bird, you probably heard of Bird heads. But Bird also does custom insert tooling. So this profile is actually one I had to do a set of custom screen doors. And I had to have this profile made. So we literally drew it in the computer, like drew the profile, sent it off to them. They ground the knives, they ship me the knives, and they go in the head.
How much are a set of knives?
Oh. $600, $650 for a set.
I mean, it's
Because it's the knives and the backing plates. So like the backing plates are expensive. Like once you have the profile, you're never going to replace the backing plates. You're going to replace the knives. So like if you're doing a lot of them, you just get a couple sets of knives and it gets incrementally cheaper, but that first one will kill you. It's so expensive. But again, if you're doing 8 custom screen doors for a,
How heavy is that thing?
it's like 25 pounds.
It looks like a fly.
It's a solid chunk of steel.
But getting it fire up first.
Yeah. So the other thing I've got some videos I wanted to show you, but the other thing I wanted to show you is we talked about passing for the cope cut. Oh, by the way, the other thing about this set from Italy is by changing the configuration of those cutters, you can do different kinds of cuts. So look at this cut. This is for a glass door, for a door with a glass panel that goes in. So it increases the tenon size and leaves you a bigger lift so you can put glass holders on. So when I'm making glass doors, and I brought the book, it's actually kind of fascinating because you can dial in the configuration to give yourself, let's see if I have it here, to give yourself different types of doors, and they tell you the exact settings. So like there's the set, and it shows you for the different cuts where you have to position the material against the cutter, and how that all kind of works, and the spacing, and like glass door sets and bigger tenons, and anyway, it's all very precise. They've kind of thought through it. But we were talking about whether it's on a router table or on a shaper, making this cut, making that end cut, and holding the board 90 degrees. So I brought 2 pieces of equipment to do that. So this is the answer to do that from a company called Einer, or Eigner, depending on how German you are. So this thing rides against the fence of the router table or shaper. So let's make believe this is my fence, and this will ride like this, right? And it holds the material like this and auto clamps. So there's this little clamp mechanism. I don't have it set up right now for this size, but you set it up for the size, and it's a spring-loaded clamp. So you shove this against the fence, you bring your piece of wood in, and you hit the button, and then you just ride it through. And this will ride against the fence, supporting the cut all the way through. It's a brilliant answer. And this is actually not expensive. This is one of the few Einer things that's not expensive. And the cool thing too is you can put your own. So when you're milling stock, you mill extra to make your spacer board. So the thicknesses are exactly the same, right? So you're riding on the piece that you screw in. But the Germans, right? Terrifying human beings, amazing engineers. That's what I always say. So yeah, but they make, this is a great answer for a coping sled. Now, here's another coping sled. So this is what's called a cope crafter. And it is a solid chunk of aluminum with a clamp, a pneumatic clamp. with a template in the front. So what you do is you put this on your router table or your shaper. Here's the fence, let's say, no, trying to simulate this here. Let's say this is the fence of your shaper. And you put this against the fence, you put your piece in, you flip the lever, and the pneumatic clamp comes down and air comes out the bottom to hover it off the table. So it just moves like butter. So the whole thing just hovers on a very thin layer of air. And so you clamp it down, make your pass. We're registering the edge against your fence. And you can take off all the material you want because you're not registered against the end of the material. You're registered against the fence with this piece. What makes this so nice is one, it's fast, right? Like lightning fast, you just bang and go. But the other thing is, who's to say this couldn't be curved? And you ride against a bearing. So if you're going to do an arch top door, you take those cutters, you put a bearing on the top, and then take a piece of MDF, cut the arch that you want, and screw that in here instead of a straight piece and ride it against the bearing and make a nice curve cut. So it's very, very useful. It's a versatile piece of equipment, whether for cope cuts or not, but I use it a lot for cope cuts.
The throat's fairly wide in that. Can you run 3 or 4 at a time?
You might be able to. I never have, and I don't think I would. I'll tell you why. I'd be concerned of chatter. I'd be worried that one isn't quite as held down as the next one, and there'd be a little bit of chatter. You know what I mean? But I guess you could. Now, this is the small one. They make the same thing 2 feet wide for raised panels. Because if you think about it, if you did a curved rail and you want a curved raised panel to match the rail, you've got to be able to run. So same thing, you can make a raised panel, stick it in that thing, have a bearing with your panel cutter, and your hands are out of the way. So it's a nice little piece. I don't think they make this anymore. I got it many, many years ago, but that's nice. Now I have a video to show what I do every day. So on my shaper, I have a large coping table that I bought with the shaper that bolts on. So it's really heavy, weighs a couple 100 pounds, and I wheel it over on a cart and slide it on and bolt it and set it up, and it has pneumatic clamps. I have a video that I took just to kind of show you. I don't know if I'm sharing. Let's make sure I'm sharing. And the main thing here is speed. Right? It really is speed. So here we go. Let's see if I can. Okay. Let's see here. Can you guys all see that?
Yep.
All right, here we go. So that is that cutter, and it's spinning. It's that cutter. So here I have 2 pneumatic clamps, one pushing back, one pushing down, and I'm just running. I'm registering the piece against the fence, and it's a single pass. And it's the mass of this sliding table and the precision of it. My hands are nowhere near anything. I don't worry about blowout. I don't worry about kickback. I don't worry about the part coming out, and it's fast. So, if you're doing, the job I just did was 8 rooms of cabinetry, and the pile of rails that I had to cut, there were thousands of parts, right? So you don't want to spend a week, you know what I mean? And that's how I do this now.
Is there a backer piece?
So on that cutter, I don't need a backer piece. There's no blowout at all. It's dead nuts. And I'm going to trim the door anyway. I leave 3 millimeters extra, and I cut the 3 millimeters off when I trim the door. And I never blow out more. So.
Is it because it's a large family thing?
And it's a super sharp and super precise, and so that's how I do the rails. And then the stiles. Oh, actually, I don't know if I have maybe I do. Yeah, here we go. So check this out. So to do the stiles, we were talking about the problem of removing the whole edge when it's registered against the fence. So what I do is I don't register it against the fence. I register the back of the stile against an outboard fence. Does that make sense? So I can remove the entire edge. It doesn't matter how wide that piece is, because the entire edge is coming off when I pass it over it. Oh, is this a video? No, that's not a video.
How do you hold it against the outboard?
I use a feeder, a power feeder. Well, and so for the panel, so it's similar to this, but here's the panel video. So that's the panel raiser. That cutter is like 8 inches diameter. It's also from the same company. It's Insert Tooling. And it's terrifying. It's like a helicopter. It's absolutely terrifying. What's that? Yeah, same shaper. Yeah. So there's the power feeder. You'll see it when it steps back a little bit. That's the power feeder. In this case, I made a fence with a piece of aluminum so I could get right up close to it, but it's just single pass. And that's actually, it's probably this door. So again, could I do all this with the router table? Definitely. It would take 3 to 4 times as that. And I'm lazy, so I want to move quickly. Anyway, but that's, so real cabinet shops. There you go. Real cabinet shops have dedicated machines for doing this type of work. Like I'm using a good shaper to do it and I'm setting up tooling, but like there are door machines where, you put the piece in and it's like only for cope and stick and panel work. And that's all they do. And they're called, there's a company called Unique that makes a number of these door machines and they're like 30 grand, 40 grand. I mean, they're not that expensive for what they do.
You're talking like a big cabinet shop?
Yeah,
Like-
yeah. Well, like the door guys up by Jackson, north of Lansing,
Yeah.
rather. Like those guys, they've got a Unique. And you could do it with a shaper, you could, or 4 shapers, right? Or you could do it with one of those machines, but that's typically how they're done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so if you want to see the tooling, I brought it, but I wouldn't recommend touching it. It's super sharp. And I cut myself almost every time I lift it up. And yeah, dropping it would suck. So
That's David chasing the program.
oh my God.
Those already cut the size, and then you just registered against aluminum scripted.
And that was a fence I made for that raised panel cutter because I wanted to just catch that edge and be really close to the cutter. So I just bolted that on the fence. I don't have a sticking, I don't have a sticking video, but essentially it's using the same power feeder and aiming the board out against that outboard fence. And that just does this cut, right? So all I need is one straight edge and that edge goes there and just takes off.
Do you do like in 8-foot lengths or you just do them in the actual door lengths?
Yeah, no, I prep all the stock to
I was if you're
spreadsheets.
like, yeah, I have 8-foot boards. I just like keep it going. And
It's impossible to keep stuff straight. You know what I mean? Like you just end up with boards that are just all over the place. For me.
I understand we got no blowout cutting into it.
You got to come look at these. It's the Italians. See, they're like great engineers and they're not terrifying. No, I mean, unless I'm cutting like Hatoba or some like ridiculously hard, chippy wood. It don't. Well, I should say this, not enough to matter. Because once I glue it up, I'm going to trim it anyway. You know what I mean? So I'm taking a 16th off for a couple millimeters off on each pass anyway. So it just doesn't. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, and it's floating in space, right? So that cut, it's floating in space and you see the speed. I'm just doesn't care.
And is there any variation in that float level?
No, that's a great point. So it's 6 millimeters. That's the and it is 6 millimeters.
How do they
Like
do that?
they just machine the crap out of those knives. I mean,
No, how do you float it exactly 6
well,
millimeters?
how do I do
No,
it?
how do you
He's not
machine
talking
it
about,
to?
he's not talking about that. He's
Is
talking
there
about the
specialized
table.
pressure?
Wait, I'm
We're talking
You're
about
talking about the sliding
How is
table,
the
right?
table always-
no. The cutter machines
No, I know, but-
exactly a 6 millimeter groove.
But you're cutting using the sliding table when you're talking about the cutter with the blower. People, I think, are talking about this.
Oh, this?
This thing floating at 6 millimeters. They got confused when you said float. They were thinking you meant the
It
sled.
has an air
right.
cushion.
No.
You
Yeah,
say
no,
the
but we're
floor-
talking probably a couple of microns,
I see.
right?
Okay.
It just gets it,
Got it.
it puts an air layer between it and the surface and it just glides.
It's amazing that that consistent.
It's amazing. Well, and there's a little dial. So there's a little dial where you can change the amount of float and I can feel it. Like if I change it, I can kind of, oh, yeah, just a little bit, just a little. But even that doesn't matter because you're gonna sand them anyway.
Just like an air hockey.
Yeah,
It's air.
that's exactly right.
Just the terrifying one.
Yeah, I mean, well, I feel better. And then the other thing too is the mass, right? Like even if the cutter caught something and wanted to kick it across the room, that weighs so much that I don't feel worried that it's gonna kick it out of my hands or kick it out of the sled. Like it might destroy the piece, but who cares? I'm safe.
It'll kick you back to 3 kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it might shift it or
Yeah,
something
that's what
like,
I mean.
right,
It's gonna be
exactly.
like 3 inches, like, oh.
But I can tell you, I've never had it happen, not once. Yeah, and I think it's just because those cutters are so sharp. Anyway, yeah.
A couple of times people have mentioned about gap filling glue. I was at a symposium a couple months ago and Type Bond had done an hour and a half talk.
Oh,
on glues and adhesives. And that's that guy's full-time job.
Yeah.
He travels around the country doing it. And so I mentioned our club.
Yeah.
And he said if there was an interest,
Oh,
he would.
well, we should get the Type On guy here.
Yeah,
That'd be
so
great.
I can talk to him, we can figure out what month it is and
That'd be amazing.
depending on what the time of day is, he would either be in person or most likely on Zoom. But it was not boring.
Oh, no, I'm sure that would be fascinating.
On
Yeah.
our website, you posted a link to
Yeah.
his YouTube video.
One of the podcasts.
Which is,
Yeah.
I think critical watching.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
It opened
Did
my
he,
eyes.
did he talk about construction adhesive and cutting the end of the tube?
They talk about everything.
Yeah, it's cool. No, we should get him. That'd be great. It's fascinating.
Yeah, because he covers everything from construction to cabinet making to instrument making. I mean, so he goes through the aliphatics, he goes through CA, he goes through epoxies.
Yeah.
So all the stuff that you would normally do.
Yes.
Would be really applicable to a lot of the projects that we do.
And he brings them up. We have to be good guests and, they get to all go home here in about 5-10 minutes, so